welcome to today's lesson. And this lesson will be covering things from callbacks, promises, async awaits, and synchronous and asynchronous codes. Today we would be entering some real world of Node.js because you mostly use asynchronous code in Node.js. I want you to know that every API you will ever build will depend on this lesson. So you need to pay adequate attention, and you need to note that everything in Node.js is asynchronous by default. And by the end of today's class, you would understand what it means by synchronous versus asynchronous code, and callback function, promises, async await, and you also learn how to read, write, and append, and also delete files in Node.js using the file system module. So, what are synchronous code? So, let's start from synchronous code. When we say a code is synchronous, it means that the code actually runs line by line. That is, nothing moves until the current line finishes. So, take for instance, if I have something like 3 lines of code that says tax A processing. Now we have 3 lines of code saying tax A processing, tax B processing, and tax C is processing. So now, if I run this code now, you'll see that the 3 codes will run sequentially. Like tax A will first process finish, tax B, and the console logged out, then tax B, then tax C. So we would have something like, so let me see, npm run start, or let me use dev. Remember where our dev is coming from. We are using nodemon to do this. So you see, we have tax A, tax B, and what? Tax C sequentially. So now the alternative is asynchronous. What does this mean? It means that some tasks are sent away to be processed in the background, meaning that our code might not be synchronous, meaning that it might not be running line by line. We could move some tasks to the background and continue with other part of our code. So I could say something like console.log tax A processing. So let's say I include a timer, something like a JavaScript set timeout that basically delays the execution of a code. So I could say what tax B is processing. So I could delay this for, let's say, we delay this for 4 seconds. So I could say tax C is also processing. You can see that. So I could say tax C is also processing. So on a normal, in our synchronous code, we add tax A, tax B, and tax C. But now, in our asynchronous code, you can see that tax A first ran. Now, since this code is being delayed, it just moved to the next. So this is moved to the background. So this part of the code that has a delay is moved to the background. Then it continues running the other lines of code. Why? That's why we have tax A is processing, tax C is processing. Then when tax B is done, then it is now being processed. So you see that. So that's what makes Node.js to be fast. So basically, Node is fast because of this concept and design. So the next concept is called callbacks. So what is callbacks? So I could actually define a function that is passed as an argument to another function. You remember that before now, you actually pass in value as an argument to a function. If you have a function called add, then you have something like a and b, then you have return a plus b. So these are the parameters. A and b are the parameters. Then you could pass something like add 5 and 6. So 5 and 6 are the values that are passed into this function. But now callback means a function. Then let's say you're passing a function. You're passing a function that basically does what? Let's say basically returns a and b. So we can call this callback. So we could execute this. So I could execute my callback. I could say call back. So I could say something like 5 and 6. So if I run this, they say b is not defined. Sorry, a plus b. So let me console log it out. Console log a plus b. So you can see that. So now I'm passing this function inside our add function. So this is a function passed inside our add function, and it is called inside our add function. So that's basically what callback is, meaning you're passing a function as an argument to another function, then you execute that function inside that other function. That's basically what callback is. So the next thing is your promise. So we have a concept called promises. You should have been be aware of promises from NodeJs from your JavaScript class. So there are different state of promises. So basically, what is promises first? So a promise is a value that will be available later. Basically, it's actually going to be available later. So let's say you're making a request from a website. Now that's a promise. Now it's going to be available later. So we actually have to wait a bit until the response from that website is given to us. So there is a kind of delay in between requesting a data from another website and getting the response. So that's basically what promise is. And then we have three state of promises. We have the pending, we have the fulfilled, and we have the rejected. So let's say when you make the request to a website or to a backend, now it will be in pending. Now once you get the response, now the promise will be fulfilled. But now if you don't get the response, the promise will be rejected. So this is an example of a promise. So you could say you could define a promise like this. So you could have promise which takes in a resolve and you have your reject. So we could set time out that models and a call to a backend. We could say something like resolve. So we want to resolve operation data successfully returned. I want to model this. So I can say 2000. So I want to wait for 2 seconds. So I can say promise dot then I want to get, so I want to implement this promise. Then I want to call this promise. Then if the promise actually fulfilled, I can say data is equal to console.log data. So if I run this, you can see that the data is what? Data successfully returned. So now I set this timeout. Now I returned this. Or if I reject this, you can see that we no longer have so we have a rejection. So he said this error originated either by throwing inside of an async function or by rejecting a promise which was not handled with cache. So if your promise is fulfilled, it will strike this then. So anything, if your promise is fulfilled, you have access to it from this then. But if your promise is rejected, you have access to it from your cache. So you could say something like, so your cache gets an error. You could say something like an error occurred. So you could have this. So you can see that because we rejected that promise, so that's why it's striking this catch. But now if I resolve the promise so that it is fulfilled, now we are going to get our data successfully what? Returned. So that's basically that for promise. Now the next thing is called what? Async await. So basically promises are not actually being used that much anymore. So what is basically used now is our async await. So let's say for our async await, sorry, and the best way to handle all these promises is actually by using async await, not as if promises is not actually being used, is by using async what await. So if I say something like I want you to note that using async await actually makes our asynchronous code looks synchronous, meaning it makes it look as if it is running line by line. So if I define a function, let's call this function wait, then I say return, so this will return a promise, then I will get my resolve and reject. So if I set time out, then if I have a callback that says resolve maybe done, then I wait for, let's say, 2 seconds. So now using our async await, you need to make sure that the functions start with an async. You can define the function that said start. Now every place where you are going to be using await, you make sure the function is defined with async. So now you can say console.log, we want to wait for, we want to actually wait. You can say something like result is equal to await wait. So we want to wait for this. Then since this is a promise, so there will be a kind of some delay. So we are just trying to mock a delay, something like a database call or a call to another website, or you want to fetch something from another website. So you can say something like console.log results. Please note, whenever you use your await, whenever you use your await, make sure you use your async. So if I call this start now, can you see that it is waiting? So can you see that it is waiting? Then we have our done. But now what if I have something like I am still running? So can you see what's happening? Remember that there is a what? There is a set timeout. Normally, if you have been paying attention from the last class, Now, once there is a set timeout, it actually ignores it, then move to the next code. But now, using this async await, you actually wait for it to resolve first. Then we get the result, then before we proceed to the next. So do you see the differences? So when you're using async await, you have to, it actually wait for that result to be uh resolved first. It will wait for that result to be gotten first before we move to the next. But if you don't use async await, let me remove this. Let me remove this. So if I have this, so we have promise is pending. So can you see that we this one ran waiting? So this is waiting. Then it moved to what? It moved to the next. It moved to I'm still running, but now this has not yet resolved because it said promise is what is pending. So what do I need to do next? So for this scenario, you have to use async. And we need to wait for it to keep for it to be done before we move to the next. So can you see that? So can you see that? So that's that for async await. I think that will be all for this lesson. Next class will be treating or handling file with NodeJs. So thank you very much.